About how we see the world. That's an S4 and our operating brand Monks. A little bit about the global situation. More importantly, how we're reacting to it. So our view on how clients should think about those changes that are taking place. The third thing, talk a little bit about the digital industry. I differ a little bit from Benedict in that I don't think things have become more complicated. I actually think they've become simpler. A lot of people criticize me for saying that, but I'll get into that. A little bit about AI and its impact on that industry I'm going to talk about. And then finally, three things that I think that marketeers in India, that's clients and agencies, should think about, not just in India, but worldwide. So let me kick off with the world, which is a very disruptive place. So there are three big issues at the minute that we should all think about, and I'll just give you where I think it's going, obviously with the primary influence being Trump 2 and President Trump is now in the White House. The first is US-China relations. My view is they're going to bifurcate still further. So the world is going to fragment. Those of you who study marketing will remember a professor, Ted Levitt at Harvard Business School, who talked about globalization in the 1980s. I'm not saying it's over, but the world is becoming more fragmented, and the US and China, I think, will diverge. And China will increasingly align itself, if that is the fact, with the BRICS, with the next 11, with the Global South. So that's one thing. Second is Russia-Ukraine. Even if there is a settlement, which I hope there is, I doubt whether President Putin's motivations will change. And I think Eastern Europe will continue to be a place under pressure, and Europe will remain under pressure as a result. The third area of the world, putting North Korea to one side and the Supreme Leader to one side, is the Middle East, where I'm a bit more optimistic. I think the things that you saw in Trump 1 around the Abraham Accords and the initiatives that Saudi Arabia will take in normalizing relationships with Israel, on the understanding that there's a solution to the governance of Gaza and the West Bank, I think that we'll see a bit of an improvement. So that is a world that is extremely difficult to navigate, certainly far more difficult to navigate than we've been used to. And worldwide growth is still going to be strong. Here in India, you're blessed, or you will be blessed with growth at 6, 7, 8%, but the world is going to grow slightly slower than it did before, around 3%. Inflation is much more stubborn than people think, and we're seeing that with the Fed and other central banks at the minute, as they can't bring interest rates down as fast as people thought. And therefore, as inflation is stubborn, interest rates will remain higher than we've been used to. Now, out of that difficult world come two things for our clients. The first is you have to pick where you operate much more carefully than you've done historically. And as I look at the world, these are the growth spots. North America, certainly the animal spirits in America are as strong as I've ever seen them. I go back to 1985 and Ronald Reagan, when he again had an inauguration in the rotunda in the White House inside. And you think about America really being on steroids at the minute. Certainly it'll last for the next 1 to 2 years before the US midterms. We'll see what happens after then if Trump's policies are inflationary. So North America and South America in the same time zone, I think very significant in terms of growth, despite left-wing governments in Mexico with Obrador and Sheinbaum, or Petru in Colombia, or Lula in Brazil, Milei in Argentina being slightly different. Middle East, despite the political turmoil, huge opportunities. We're doing a lot of work both in Saudi and the UAE, and we see significant opportunities for growth and development. And then, of course, Asia, as a whole, really strong. By 2050, 3 of the world's largest economies, China, India, and Indonesia, will be in the top 5. The other 2 will be Germany and probably Japan. So that will be the way that it sorts out, and Asia will be critically important. One caveat about Asia: if you're big as a client in China, defined as 15 to 20% or more of your sales in China, do you really want to be bigger given the Taiwan and security risk? And that's where India comes to play, because India is the alternative. So China, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, all offer huge opportunities for our clients in terms of growth. Now, I didn't mention Africa. Africa is too volatile for my taste and many of our clients' tastes, but will offer opportunity on a micro basis. And then Europe is very troubled at the moment. I come from the UK. UK is under huge economic pressure, along with France and Germany, and I don't think that those 3 economies will grow significantly faster than they are doing currently, unless there's a dramatic change in leadership, the sort of leadership that you have at a high level here in India under Prime Minister Modi. Clearly understands the importance of leadership, the importance of branding, and the importance of strength and direction and vision. So that's one thing. So pick your geographies. I mentioned the difficulty in Europe. That brings me to the second thing clients have got to think about. That is using the technological developments that we're going through, not just AI, but quantum computing, the cloud, and the metaverse, the much maligned metaverse. The metaverse probably is given, it was overhyped before, but probably underhyped now. The sort of things, having myself gone through a medical issue over the last couple of years, I've seen the huge changes that the metaverse has brought to to solving health and medical issues. So the 2 things that come out of that disruption that we're seeing economically and politically are choose your geographies and think about using technology to improve efficiency and effectiveness in a world like Europe, which is under pressure, but a world that is going to grow much more slowly or more slower than it has done before. Now let me turn to the industry where I sort of differ a little bit from Benedict. Advertisers spend about $1 trillion on advertising. The maths is quite easy now, so think of $1 trillion. 700 billion goes on digital. Here in India it's about 50-50, worldwide it's about 70% digital, and 300 billion in traditional, TV, newspapers, magazines in their traditional form. That part of the industry is actually shrinking. If you don't have live sports, your ad revenues, your ABC or CBS or NBC or whatever, is going down by about 10 or 15% a year at the moment. If you do have live sports like a Disney or a Fox, you're down about 0 or 5%. But the 300 is basically shrinking. The 700 billion is growing at about 10 to 15%. Last night, Meta reported their Q4 ad revenues. They were up by 22%, but generally the platforms are growing by about 10 or 15% over the last few years. Now, just what's really interesting is the market shares of the platforms. Alphabet accounts for 250 billion of the trillion, 25% share. Meta last night was 160, but call it 150, approximately 15%, takes you to 40. Amazon, 61 billion roughly last year. We'll see what their final numbers come out. I said several years ago they will get to 100 billion. I remain of that view. Amazon will shortly, I would say in the next 3 to 4 years, get to 100 billion of advertising. That's another 6%. And TikTok, in its current form, outside mainland China, is about 40 billion or 4%. Those 4 platforms are 50% of worldwide spend and 70% of digital. The balance being Alibaba and Tencent and ByteDance in China. ByteDance as a whole, by the way, is 150 billion, about roughly the same size as Meta. The dominance of those platforms is very significant. They are the key media sellers, the key media companies, and with AI, they will gain in importance and significance. Apple's around about 11 billion, Microsoft around 19 billion, Snap about 5, Walmart 3, Pinterest 4. I give you those at Twitter used to be 5, now as X is more likely 2. So the concentration is huge, and the concentration will continue. So that's the background to the digital economy. It's 70% now. When we started S4 6 years ago, it was 50%. My view is in the next 2 to 3 years, digital will probably be 85%. AI, what are the implications for our industry? You heard a little bit from Sorrel and Piyush's panel with Harish, a little bit about it, and you sense there the dichotomy between human and machines. But there are 5 things happening in our industry that are of critical importance. The first thing is that visualization and copywriting has become much more efficient and much faster. Time to market to produce advertising has shrunk from a week or a month or even longer to literally hours. Not great news for agencies because they usually charge on time. And if it's less time, they earn less. But if you switch your charging to outputs, it gets a little bit more interesting. And that brings me to the second area. So there will be fewer copywriters, visualizers, in my view, in that first section. The second area, and Harish touched on this with Piyush and Sorrel, is the area of hyper-personalization and scale. For content producers like Amazon, for a campaign that we might for them, before AI or in the course of preparation of AI, we might produce in just one campaign 1 million or so assets. Like actually about 1.5 million alternative permutations of individualized content. With AI now, we can do multiples of that. Huge opportunity, particularly if you charge on the basis of assets produced. Number of assets going up enormously, price per asset falling, but the multiple of the two increasing significantly. So huge opportunities there. The third area is media planning and buying. It is, I would go as strongly as saying ludicrous that 250,000 people work in 6 holding companies and in other agencies on media planning and buying. If you look at the investment industry, which is very similar to media planning and buying, it is quite clear that the work should be done algorithmically. It makes no sense to do it semi-manually or semi-automatically. So what you will see over the next few years, I would say over the next 2 to 3 years, is a huge increase in algorithmic analysis of planning and buying. And if you want the evidence, it's happening in real time. Last night, Meta, in their analyst call, their CFO called out Advantage Plus. Advantage Plus is a way that clients already, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, are automating content creation and media planning and buying. And it's actually hit already about 20 billion. So the run rate for Advantage Plus currently at Meta, out of 160 billion last year of ad revenues, it's running at the rate of 20 billion and getting huge traction. It's probably doubled in the last year. So media planning and buying is going to be revolutionized, I think, in the next 2, 3, 4 years. You will not rely on a 25-year-old media planner and buyer. You're going to rely on an algorithm, and that media planner and buyer will have better outputs for him or her to analyze planning and buying. The fourth area is general efficiency. I won't bore you with it, but just touch one example. We have a venture with AWS, with Adobe and NVIDIA a joint venture in outside broadcasting. Historically, you would buy a truck to do an outside broadcast for $10 million. You'd amortize it over 5 years, cost you $2 million a year. We can produce using AI and cloud that same program for about $100,000 or $200,000. So you're talking about an 80 to 90% cost reduction. So that's the fourth area, general efficiency with agencies and clients. And the fifth area, which I think is really the most interesting, is democratization of knowledge. It is no accident that Jensen Huang who's the CEO of NVIDIA, has 51 direct reports. If you went to McKinsey and said, what's the span of management that you should have normally, they would say 12 or 13 people. He has a far larger number because what he has done is through AI enfranchise the whole organization. So what you're going to start to see is much flatter organizations where people do not control silos or control operations through controlling information. Information will be democratized. And Jensen, for example, has very few apparently one-on-one meetings. What he does is set objectives for his direct reports and monitors their performance. But information is being spread throughout the organization in a much more democratic way. The biggest problem that I see with clients and with agencies is their unwillingness to share information. That's the critical factor. Political activity and behavior is conditioned by control of information. That largely, with AI, will be democratized. So with those 5 things happening, that is having a very, very significant impact on our industry. And net, I don't want to be negative about it, but I do think it will result ultimately in less jobs in traditional industries. Certainly the more mundane activities will be reduced. There's a famous economist in the UK called John Maynard Keynes who wrote a pamphlet on automation in the 1930s, and he said the impact of automation will result in us having more holidays. I think AI will end up doing the same. Let me just finish with 3 things that I think marketeers and agencies, but particular marketeers, should think about. And these are 3 qualities that I think are really, really important. The first is agility. Easy to say, every CEO standing on a stage like this, of an agency or of a client, says their organization is agile. But in the world I described, where there is so much volatility and so many challenges happening at literally at light speed, agility is absolutely key. So speaking about it is one thing, but actually doing it and implementing it is critically important. The second thing is take back control. I think marketeers have to take back control. You may find that odd coming from an agency man, but the reason I think is quite clear. In the great financial crisis of 2008 and after it, the financial function inside clients said, outsource. Let's get the head count out. That's totally wrong in an AI technologically driven world. Clients have to take back control, and they have to internalize more and more of their functions. That's because of control of content and ideation is critically important. Data is critically important. I'll come on to it in relation to the third thing. And having an understanding on a detailed basis, particularly in areas such as visualization and copywriting and personalization and scale and media planning buying is critically important. So what we're seeing, for example, in the work that we're doing with General Motors, who are the first company on a global basis to really look at AI in a truly analytical way and change their organization as a result. The sort of things we're doing are very much about changing the nature of control by client and agency. There are 3 models. There's an embedded model where we put our people into the client. There's the in-house model, and there's the outsource model to us. So take back control is also very important. And the third thing is first party, and the final thing is first party data. It's critically important for clients to control, integrate closely their data. This third-party data has been nixed by Google's decision. They haven't actually fully implemented it, but effectively they have, to nix third-party cookies, and the IDFA changes that Apple have made, creating constituencies or cohorts instead of individualized data. But control of first-party data together with the signals, for example on Amazon, is critically important. So, in summary, a difficult world, but a world where picking geographies and using technology to drive efficient DC is critically important. A world where digital dominates, and the platforms, the key platforms, there's an Oracle and Adobe, I think in particular, will become increasingly important in an AI-driven, energy-driven, capital investment-driven world, will become critically important. AI driving significant changes, and clients having to react with agility, taking back control, and data being the real fuel. Thank you very much.
So, Martin,